Bartnowski. Uh-oh. Due to technical difficulties, there we go. We're back in the game again. Okay. Should I start all over again, Eric?
All you, man.
Sure, all me. Okay. So, I'd just like to state that today is Monday, September 29th, the year of our Lord 2025. Shout out to Steve Bannon, shout out to Steve Cortez, and other people who are doing the Lord's work. Because God knows we need them. Now, let me just make a point here. The level of uncertainty that we confront today is, shall I say, substantial. We have watched news item after news item. You pick the subject. Transgender violence, domestic terrorism, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. What the hell is going on with Ukraine and Russia, okay? And what's going on in the Middle East. You know, for example, we hadn't been hearing much about Syria. Now there's something back again. So what's going on? But in the meantime, you still have a substantial number of people who want to keep, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, they're going to mislead you. Hence this week's op-ed titled The Melody of Fraud. All right? It's a takeoff on Mr. James Comey. Now, it is a little problematic. So if you read the op-ed, we have it posted. The link is, let's see, where would you find it? If I send it to you, there's the link, but you can also go to our website, and the op-ed is posted as a separate piece that you can find. Here's the hot issue, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a guy who has really developed a reputation as as President Trump says, a dirty cop. Now, currently, the indictment has to do with whether or not he would have lied about leaking information to the Wall Street Journal concerning the Russia hoax. And, you know, some people are saying he's not going to get prosecuted for this, which I find remarkable, but you have that opinion. Meantime, also not being dealt with was this little stunt that he pulled back in May with the seashells. And what was it? 47, what was, yeah, 4786, right, 47, yeah, okay, that. But now, the other thing is just being talked about, I shouldn't say it's not being talked about. We have the, what is it I wanted to say here? Oh yes, the honeypot investigation. So now, we were learning, not now, it's been discussed for some time, it keeps coming up over and over again, was the two female agents who infiltrated the Trump campaign in what, 2015, 2016, with the intent of, quote, collecting information in exchange for sexual favors, or so implied. After all, they did say honeypots. Okay, this was not part of any formal investigation. It was, as they say, off the books. Comey had no file. He had no information. So in an unspoken manner, this was being run and run by him. All right, well, let's see how that one unfolds, okay? So let me just read a little bit here. Sung well, sung poorly, fraud has a melody. It is a complex melody, a melody rich in counterpoint and other musical innovation. Now, Mark Twain once observed that a singer may be able to sing the notes, but they don't have the music. That would not be true in Mr. Comey's case. He is a master of fraud, and he knows how to sing it pitch perfect. He really does. All you got to do is listen to him. And it comes with putting himself in a frame of mind. He's able to tune out everything else, and on he goes. But here's the point I want to make about the melody of fraud. It is connected to something I have brought up before. That is called agnotology. Oh my goodness, what are we talking about? Agnotology. A gentleman named Robert Proctor, I believe, who's a sociologist, but he has a biology background. He's at one of the schools in the University of California system. So he put forth this book. Basically, it was an attack on conservatives, the way he thinks about it, but that's okay. Sometimes you stumble on things that are better than you realize. Good for you. So the way he posed the idea of agnotology is to understand how ignorance happens. Okay, so his presentation, as I maintain, is sort of a passive approach to the following. Dramatic pause. This phrase is extremely important, ladies and gentlemen. You might even want to take out your number 2 pencil and write it down. False knowledge. Okay, I want to distinguish false knowledge from lies. Lies would be a subset, a data point in the subject of false knowledge. Now, agnotology, while it doesn't necessarily address the issue of false knowledge, if you're trying to understand ignorance and how ignorance comes about, implied in that is how lying is used to create ignorance. Believe me, that opens up one hell of a can of worms. So if you're going to pursue this, the way he does it's not quite there, but you can see it if you just think about it. How are you going to talk about the ways in which you have psychological operations that continue to mislead you? Okay? That is the applied use of agnotology. So all of that figures into how Mr. Comey conducts himself. And I am simply warning you, expect more from Mr. Comey, which will constitute the finely crafted weaving together of pieces of information that really do constitute, wait for it, false knowledge. Okay. So let me read the last part here. There is so much lying to consider that one has to develop a framework that structures and connects all this deception. The work has begun, but the scope of this fraud is still unknown. The deep state has had a lot of time to develop all this fraud. If you really want to get a handle on this, you'll need to read Satan's Libretto. There really is something called Satan's Libretto, and the link is right there. So go check it out. Meantime, just to bring it up, there's been this weird kind of back and forth over Antifa in Portland and President Trump saying he's going to deploy 200 National Guard troops there. First, it's like, it's stone cold obvious, they're going. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe we need to have a better fix on what's going on the ground. But then we're going to go ahead and do it. So this article here talks about how the National Guard was there. Antifa tried to protest, but he didn't work out very well. And we'll get to an Antifa-related story in a few minutes, so stay tuned for that. Okay, now, Vladimir Putin. He just keeps coming up. He's like a bad penny, right? So here's the claim that Vladimir Putin this week is going to make a quote, air quotes, major speech. A major speech, really. Of course, he didn't say what it is. It's a teaser, and he wants you to stick around to hear what he's going to have to say. Okay, so, more cynical people have said, well, it'll be a speech where he simply announces that Ukraine belongs to them. That could be true. But in the context of all the other things that have been going on, you got to wonder. So, all right, I've been through this before. I'm going to go through it again. I'm so sorry. Okay. Let's start with the big one. As you may recall, we mentioned before that Russia's mortgage market has interest rates for mortgages hitting 21%. That is an obscenely high mortgage rate. And what the hell is going on? Well, I will add to the mystery by pointing out, ladies and gentlemen, normally when you have a financial body or authority, such as in Russia, that decides to set high interest rates, they're doing it to put pressure on, that's right, inflation. But Russia's inflation is at around 3%. Why do you have a sky-high interest rate in order to suppress inflation? Ladies and gentlemen, the thing that is so weird is that the inflation rate in Russia is about the same as in America, in the 3% range. Yet, in America, what do we have? What, 4, 5, 6% interest rates? Okay, so there's some problem that I'm having with that, okay? So we'll just let that sit for now. There's a lot more to say about the puzzles of Russia. And the latest, if anybody was paying attention, okay, you have two groups in the country of Moldova. I wish I brought a map. Okay, if you know where Romania is, so let's say this is Romania, okay? If you look to the east of Romania, this section right here, is Moldova. And then you have a very thin sliver called the Transnistria province, the breakaway Transnistria province. This is Transnistria's where the Russians have managed to set up some operations. It's kind of almost a flanking thing in terms of dealing with Ukraine. We won't get into that right now. Moldova had a vote, and the vote was over, are we going to lean towards NATO or are we going to lean towards Russia? Now, the problem, of course, is that Russia has long felt that Moldova belongs to them as well. Moldova used to be a part of Romania. It was Stalin who carved off what we now know as Moldova, which was part of Romania, and there's been this back and forth ever since. So the fact of the matter is that those people who live in Moldova don't necessarily feel a strong connection to Russia. So should we be surprised that here we had a vote? And what happened with this vote? They said, you know what? We like the EU better than we like Russia. Now, of course, the Russians got all upset because they felt they'd been had. One of the accusations is that there are Moldovans living in Russia who didn't get a chance to vote. And so they felt they got screwed on that account. But the bottom line is that the people in Moldova do not want to be a part of Russian influence for a whole bunch of reasons, and this brought it on. But here's the concern. If you have yet another country, not that far from Russia, leaning towards Europe, we see this as raising the risk for World War III. You know, if Russia becomes more isolated, what do you think? Are they going to have a greater tendency towards warlike activity, maybe? It's something we can discuss, but not now. Next, incest is okay in the UK. Have you heard? This is unbelievable. What is the matter with these people? So now you have the British Health Service coming out and saying first cousins can get married, and they think there are economic advantages and even health benefits to this. This is insane. What planet could they possibly be on? We know that this is how you introduce genetic diseases into a population. So what in God's name are you thinking? But anyway, the article's there. Go check it out. Now this one I really like, okay? The link is up. Go check it out on our website. So the title is, Did Obama Falsify Climate Data? You know, in the fullness of time, we're going to find out that the, quote, Obama administration was far more destructive to America than we have generally appreciated. And one of those areas where this harm was done is right here. All the argument over climate, global warming, you name it. Now, the article starts out talking about plastics recycling. Now, if anybody's following it, you have the subject of microplastics. Well, you get into a range of issues with microplastics, but the bottom line is they're not good for you, okay? You should not be eating microplastics, but given the way our food system is set up, it is hard to avoid. All right, so there's that part. But anyway, this article actually lists, it says here, the top 100 clean and green energy truths, which ain't so true. So let me give you one. Number 20, temperature tracking began in 1875. Temperature fluctuations were minor, wait for it again, until 2011. What do we know about 2011? That's when Obama was president. Under Obama, suddenly the temperature data shot up inexplicably and became highly unstable. Well, how did that happen? We'd love to have an explanation, okay? And the other thing is that since Obama got to town, we have caught many groups, private and governmental, fabricating false data. I will just use one example, okay? Around the planet, there are supposed to be temperature stations, okay? This has been discussed often. So the idea is that by taking temperature in all these different locations, there's hundreds of locations around the, and that's another subject. That's different. This is ground-based stations. In the case, for example, of Australia, there are a number of areas where there were no temperature stations. So when you had the people collecting all the data, and they noticed, wait a second, in this area, there are no temperature stations here. They made it up. Okay, this has been shown to be true. They fabricated the existence of these temperature stations, and they fabricated the temperature data according to their expectations, which obviously don't have anything to do with reality or how nature's functioning. Okay, that's just one example. Now, at the same time, Eric mentioned there's, you say, sonar. They're really diving robots. So back in 2005, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration had gotten all this money for what were literally thousands of these diving robots, and their mission was to go down and to record the temperature, all the different depths, come up, surface, and then broadcast that data to a satellite, and then it was collected by NOAA and put together. So the picture is rather confusing. Before people really got their hands on this, the data was kind of showing a slight cooling trend in the oceans. But then after they got their hands on it, oh gee, all of a sudden now the deep ocean depths were warming. I'm a little skeptical, I'm just saying. Okay, anyway, lots of stuff like that in here. This is such a fantastic resource, you got to check it out. All right. Now, while you had the anti-ice protesters busy in Portland, here you had this woman who I think really does qualify for doofus of the day. Because, okay, we got to give her some credit. She was a civic-minded person who was very concerned about the fact that illegal aliens were going to be sent home. And she's out there doing her best to fight ICE, being an anti-ICE protester. There's just one problem. She was driving a car. And when she saw the ICE officials capturing some illegal aliens, she was very concerned, jumped out of the car, and that's right, forgot to put the car in park. So what happened? The car rolled down into the lake. Let's see if I can find the picture here. Into the drink. Now, unfortunately, of course, you get her car back, but in this moment, right, so there it is, there she is, and there's the car. You just wish that the car had really like sunk, but no. Okay, so I'm sure she felt just a little bit foolish, and the best part, ladies and gentlemen, she had no effect on what ICE was doing. Okay, they got their job done, just saying. Right, something completely different. This is interesting. This raises all kinds of cool questions, all right? The title says, intense light therapy may lower risk of myocardial injuries after non-cardiac surgery. All right, so this was just a test on mice, but it still raises an interesting question. What they show here, let me read the pull quote here. Intense light therapy after surgery can increase a critical protein that protects heart tissue while lowering levels of troponin, which is a protein that can indicate heart damage. So in effect, this intense light therapy is producing some kind of a healing effect. Now, in this piece that I read, they didn't say what the frequency of the light was, but there's a lot of research showing that infrared seems to have a particularly beneficial effect on soft tissue. So this becomes very interesting because there's just all kinds of possibilities that come out of that. So let's move on. Young man.
Well?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, now, this comes in three parts. Okay. This is under usually when I mention Tina Peters. Okay. Tina Peters is still in jail. Governor Polis still isn't getting the message. President Trump and Steve Bannon have been reminding Polis that she needs to be released, and I'm reminding the governor as well she needs to be released. You got all that going on. Part two. It turns out that Rudy Giuliani and I want to say Dominion Machines settled on this $1.3 billion defamation suit. Of course, the terms of the settlement are not being disclosed. But I just want to emphasize that the timing of this settlement, this conflict's been going on for a couple of years. So why are they settling now? What could possibly be going on about this time that would cause them to settle? For the moment, I'll leave that as an unanswered question. Now we're going to jump to part 3, which may turn out to be more important. And that is the unfortunate ruling against Mike Lindell concerning the defamation case involving the other company. Well, there's some serious, but Smartmatic. Okay, here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Part 3 has something to do with part 1. It turns out that there is some individual who's a part of the lawsuit against Mike Lindell who is also involved in dealing with Tina Peters. Okay, so I'm not sure how nefarious that connection is, but it's something to be noted, okay? And again, the pressure that's being put on Polis by President Trump and others is growing. And so the problem is, though it's not said, that if, or when, I should say, Tina Peters is released, the real lawsuit will begin. And we're not going to accept all this other crap where the media says, oh, there's no evidence. That's because they refuse to look at the evidence. Funny thing, if somebody decides to refuse to look at the evidence, you get to say there's no evidence. Ridiculous. But that's what we're looking at. Okay, next, I'm getting close, and then close. Sulfites. That is our food additive of the week. And by the way, I have a secret project idea in mind. What's the matter?
Go ahead and switch to samples.
Well, it's subsample. I'm not switching anything here, baby. Okay, so sulfites are a mixed bag. They show up in a lot of foods. The big concern, of course, is people like to drink wine. Sulfites are used to retard spoilage, for lack of a better term, with wine. But sulfites show up in a lot of different foods.
And peptides.
Peptides. Explain yourself, young man.
No,
Okay, all right. So, trail mix, beer, vegetable juices, sparkling grape juice, apple cider. Who knew there were sulfites in apple cider? There's something wrong with that picture. Bottled lemon juice and lime juice, tea, many condiments, molasses. Oh, yes, that's right, molasses, that's right. Fresh or frozen shrimp, guacamole, it goes on, okay? Just again mention this has sparked an idea for a book. I'm going to be working on it, and when it's ready, I'll let you know all about it. It's going to be interesting. Okay, so sulfites, you have sulfur dioxide, you have sulfates, but sulfite, let's be clear about this. Okay, so one of the big problems, in some cases, sulfites, for people who are sensitive, can cause asthma, and that's not desirable. So here's the molecular structure. Basically, it's 3 oxygens and a sulfur, okay? Now that said, I need to point out that sulfur is also shown to have a number of positive health effects, including lowering the risk of heart disease. So that's like a whole other discussion, okay? Meantime, this is so stupid. If any of you have been following this, you'll know that there is a gentleman who is now the former superintendent for a school in Iowa, who is now in prison. It turns out that this gentleman was an illegal alien. I think Roberts was his last name. Anyway, he's a native of the country of Guyana. And there's another subject for discussion. Anyway, as a native of Guyana, he came to America as a student back in the 90s, and he, shall we say, he overstayed his visa. People just kept overlooking what was going on with him. And so he worked his way into the educational system, got one job, then another job, and got promoted. And then he became the superintendent of the school system in Iowa. Yeah, the Des Moines, that's it, the Des Moines School Board. Get ready for the twist. Are you ready for the twist? This woman right here, okay? Ms. Norris. Ms. Norris, okay, she was a former chief of staff for Michelle Obama. What? How did the former chief of staff end up at the school board in Des Moines, Iowa? Who knows? But she is the one who recommended this guy in the first place. So there may be a twisted tale yet to be told about that one. So I just had to share that with you. Okay, 2 more items. 2 more killer items. All right, what am I going to do about this? I have in the past, if we were to go back into my archives, you'll find me having opined quite extensively on China's preparation to invade Taiwan. And the first problem I've had, and it's still the same in the two parts, the first problem is the scale of preparation that is required is vast. It's over 90 miles in the, Taiwan Straits there between the island and the mainland. So the talk for the longest time, and it's still going on, is about what they call these ro-ro ferries, roll-on, roll-off ferries that can serve a dual purpose, civilian military use. Well, it seems that our friends in China have been building a lot of those suckers. And some of them are being modified in a very strange capacity, which I think we really need to take a close look at, because this can be a problem. Now, this is the quality of this photo is not very good, but I'm going for it, okay? If there's any way you can get it positioned, Eric, let's see here. Okay, what you see there are 3 of those ro-ro ferries with bridges added. So clearly, the Chinese have as a plan for invading Taiwan to develop a string or chain of these ro-ro ferries, off of which personnel and material will be offloaded in the event that they invade Taiwan. All right, can we just go back to the first part here? 90 miles. Okay, if they were doing 10 knots, it would take them 9 hours to get across. What do you think the United States would do within 9 hours? Don't you think there's a good chance that this fleet will be obliterated? Well, let's go back to the problem I've been talking about for the longest time. What if we can't do it? Let me say it again for emphasis. What if we can't do it? We're not able to send the aircraft. The aircraft carriers can't get into position. Whatever satellite capabilities we have will be canceled or compromised. What if? Okay? So, I'm going to drop a hint. All right? This is a small hint, so give you something to think about. Let me remind you about another news item a couple weeks ago. The SIM card farm. Does anybody remember the SIM card farm? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, the degree to which the United States has been invaded by the communist Chinese is off the charts, and the only way in which we're finding out is by accident. Okay? I take you back to the bioweapons lab back in California a couple of years ago. All right? We just accidentally discovered the SIM card farm used for denial of service attacks. All right? Plus the pot farms. God knows what else we haven't been paying attention to or found. It's all out there. They've already done the planning, and all we're doing is finding out after the fact. All right? So what I'm submitting to you is that we're only going to find out after the fact how they're going to put the slam-a-jam on the United States when they decide to send up the flag or balloon and invade Taiwan. All right? Because this work still goes on. It ain't stopping. Not good. Meantime, the way I put it is the Democrats are suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder over the word fascist. So think of it as their fascist fetish. They've been knocking their brains out, trying to find out what way can we make Trump look unpopular, make him look bad. So Nazi doesn't work that well, but fascist, now that works. Okay? Doesn't matter how ignorant people are, doesn't matter if people can't define fascism, they don't even know where it came from. Mussolini. Doesn't matter, but here they go. So let's see here. Let me just quick passage and we're on our way here. Oh, and there's something I got to promote before I forget. All right, this is big. Okay, the Democrats have fallen for fascist like a late 70s teenager falling for that Farrah Fawcett pinup poster. And while at their keyboards all day, they keep play and they use the word in various ways, fascist, 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 not having a clue what they're talking about. If I might be so crude. They would know more what to do with the word fascist than they would know what to do with Farrah Fawcett if he was right in their room. There's your problem. All right, here's my send-off. Quick book review. Lost in Transnation, all right, written by Miriam Grossman, who's a psychiatrist, child psychiatrist at Harvard, okay? She is very much opposed to what's been happening with transgenderism and so-called gender-affirming care. So this is my send-off. I'll just read this one paragraph that she wrote in the book. It's in the introduction. I don't have the words to describe the sorrow of parents I know whose young daughter was removed by a government agency, placed in foster care, and started on testosterone. Their crime, insisting she's a girl. Or the anguish of a young man I see who sought castration to become his authentic self, and now after the fact, regrets it. Or the rage of a 20-something young woman going through menopause due to gender-affirming removal of her reproductive organs. This is the brutal insanity to which so many young people have been subjected in this country in pursuit of an absolute lie, an absolute lie. So let me pick the book up again. Definitely got to check it out. And on that happy note, I'll see you next week.